This podcast is sponsored by Talkspace.
Last year, I went through many different life changes. I needed to take a pause and examine how I was feeling in the inside to better show up for the ones who need me to be my best version of myself.
When you're navigating life's changes, Talkspace can help. Talkspace is the #1 rated online therapy, bringing you professional support from licensed therapists and psychiatry providers that you can access anytime, anywhere.
Living a busy life, navigating a long-distance relationship, becoming a first-step father, Talkspace made all of those journeys possible. I could speak with my therapist in the office. I could speak with my therapist in the comfort of my home. I was never alone.
Talkspace works with most major insurers, and most insured members have a $0 copay. No insurance, no problem. Now get $80 off your first month with promo code SPACE80 when you go to Talkspace.com. Match with a licensed therapist today at Talkspace.com. Save $80 with code SPACE80 at Talkspace.com.
So why didn't you just rent a truck and move yourself?
Once was enough. Smashed dishes, sore neck, family drama.
So moving yourself's not as easy as it looks?
That's why we used Mayflower. They packed, loaded, timed everything. No chaos, no chiropractor.
But isn't a mover more expensive?
Not really. After the truck rental, gas, time off, and broken stuff. Plus, I actually slept.
Okay, I get it.
Do yourself a favor. Move with Mayflower and relax. Moving? Go with the pros every step of the way. Get a free quote at mayflower.com.
Welcome back to the Ballet Help Desk podcast. My name is Jenny, and I'm joined by my co-founder, Brett. Today, we are so excited to welcome Carter Alexander. He is a dancer, choreographer, educator, and arts leader whose career spans professional performance, ballet training, arts administration, and higher education. He currently serves as the Associate Professor of Practice and Chair of the Division of Dance at SMU Meadows School of the Arts. Alexander began his training with his mother, Amanda Stone, in Cheyenne, Wyoming, before continuing at the Booker T. Washington High School for the Performing Arts and Visual Arts and the Dallas Ballet Academy. After high school, he danced professionally with Hartford Ballet, Kansas City Ballet, and the Pennsylvania Ballet. During his time with Hartford Ballet, he studied under master teacher Truman Finney, whose mentorship would profoundly influence his approach to teaching and artistic leadership. Following his performing career, Alexander held leadership positions with Ballet Workshop New England, Massachusetts Youth Ballet, the School of Ballet Arizona, and Miami City Ballet School, where he served as school principal and senior faculty member for 7 years. Throughout his career, Alexander cultivated the next generation of dance artists, with dozens of former students advancing to professional careers in companies across the United States and abroad. Since joining SMU faculty in 2018, Alexander has contributed to the continuing expansion of the Division of Dance artistic and educational reach through performance, curriculum development, and guest artist initiatives. Alexander holds an MFA in choreography from Jackson University and a BFA in dance performance from Southern Methodist University. So without further ado, the Help Desk is now open. Brett and I created Ballet Help Desk as the resource we wish we had when our kids were going through ballet training. Now we've got some exciting news. For a while, many of you have asked for an ad-free option, and we've been listening. We are thrilled to introduce the Ballet Help Desk Backstage Pass on Patreon. With your subscription, you will get every episode ad-free. The full back catalog, remastered with higher quality audio, and early access to the episodes before they are released publicly. As our Patreon community grows, we'll be adding new ways for you to connect more deeply with the podcast and the Ballet Help Desk community. Subscribe today. See you backstage.
Ellie's Eden, part of Azure Standard, was created for people who care about being thoughtful with what they buy, what they eat, and where it comes from. Growing even a small garden is a simple way to live that out. With healthy plant starts grown in Oregon from trusted non-GMO seeds, along with quality garden essentials, Ellie's Eden makes it easier to begin. Gardening helps you slow down, choose carefully, and stay connected to real food and the land. Learn more about Ellie's Eden at azurestandard.com.
Carter, we are so happy to have you today. Thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here and speak with you.
So before we dig into the dance program at SMU, can you just give us a quick little background on how you ended up as a professor there?
So I actually finished high school here in Dallas at the Performing Arts High School. Booker T. Washington was known as Arts Magnet back then. And so my parents had moved back here when I did that. So I kind of had come to a place that Miami City Ballet had a big director change, and it just felt like a good time to move on from being there. And we wanted to be closer. I had young kids at the time, and my wife and I wanted to be closer to some family. So my parents were the older parents, so we decided to move back this direction. And I had actually applied for a position here and didn't get it, but I came back and I was teaching locally, and then it's just kind of a natural thing of I started teaching in the university. They invited me to come teach some classes, and the students really enjoyed working with me, and so that just led to a full-time offer that kind of grew over time, and actually did a little. I went back and finished my undergrad degree and my master's degree, and so that allowed me to then eventually move into becoming the chair of the division last year. So that's kind of how I ended up here at SMU and teaching in a secondary school situation. So it's been such a nice connection with college age students and working with them after being at Miami City Ballet for 7 years, and before that teaching basically 14 to 18, 13 to 18 year olds, getting them ready for professional ballet careers.
Right. So, okay, so let's dig into talking about that. Can you tell us a little bit about the dance program at SMU?
So our program is a conservatory style program, within a liberal arts college. So it's a little bit more rigorous because it's a BFA in dance performance. So the emphasis is on creating performers. That doesn't mean we don't. I mean, we have a very strong technique program. We work very strongly on their technique. As one of my colleagues says, your technique and your artistry are twins. They were born on the same day, and they develop and go together. So that's really how we approach it. Is that the technique is what supports the clarity of their artistry, which allows them to be more expressive, have more choices as artists. So there's a very strong emphasis on their technique when they come in, and also getting them to work in a certain way. But the program ultimately is about creating performers. So it's a BFA. So there's a little bit more rigor in terms of the theoretical courses that go along with the technique courses. There's multiple performing opportunities across each semester, but it also allows the students to double major, so they can also pursue a degree in something else that interests them greatly. So we have students that are BFA dance majors, but are also mechanical engineering majors, or they're psychology majors, they're advertising majors. They're doing other majors across the university, as well as the performance major. So it's a place that allows for a lot of different kinds of growth and development.
So I have a question about the double major thing. We are actually told by some people that it's almost impossible to do if you're doing a BFA in dance. How do your students handle it, given that it's conservatory style training and there's time constraints?
Yeah. It's a long day each day for them. Our technique classes take place between 9:30 a.m. and 4:50, the varying levels. And then they squeeze in their academic classes in between that. And then, we rehearse in the evening from 6 to 10. So it can be a very long day. They have to figure out their time management, and they're allowed to take one night class per semester. So there might be a day where they need to fill a certain course requirement, and that class will meet those evening classes are usually like 3-hour classes. So they might be in that class from 6 to 9, 5 to 8, something like that. And then we allow them to miss rehearsal on that one night per week, and we work around that schedule. So we try to build in some flexibility. Sometimes we have to, fudge the schedule a little bit for them. Oh, you need to take this ballet. Like this semester, we've got a student who should be in the ballet 2 class as a rising sophomore, but she has another class that she needs to take for mechanical engineering that conflicts with that time. So we're allowing her to take a later ballet class that's one level higher, that she can absolutely do. Like there would be more of an issue if they weren't strong in that genre, but she'll be able to handle that. So we do try to do some finagling sometimes to make some things possible, but that's one of the draws of our program, is that people can double major, and actually we have multiple people that triple major. And
Wow.
I have no idea when they sleep, but we've got one. She's very serious about her ballet. She's actually at the Ballet Austin Summer Intensive right now, but she's also a data analysis major and a computer science major, as well as the
Wow.
BFA in dance. Yeah,
Gosh.
Exactly, how. And then she would take double ballet classes. So, she's an upperclassman now. She would take the morning ballet class, then she'd take the next ballet class on top of all the academic. And she's always in rehearsal and she's always cast and everything, getting cast. And we have multiple people like that go through the program that just have this incredible drive, to learn. I mean, she's just so interested in so many things. And actually, so this summer, she's interning at Ballet Austin in their data analysis for their marketing while she's also taking their summer intensive. So she's doing both things while she's down there.
That's
Like
crazy.
maximizing
Yeah.
that way. What
Yeah.
what a go-getter.
Yeah, exactly. And that we've had people, there was a student who graduated a couple of years ago. She did a double major, plus she got into an accelerated program here to do her master's 1 year on top of her senior year and then one more year after she completed her BFA in dance. She got a degree in something else I can't remember. And then she got her not her MFA, but an MA I can't remember, can't recall exactly what she got. But she did all that in 5 years. And I said to her, "When do you sleep?" And she said, "Oh, I haven't slept in 5 years." But this is a person that showed up for class and rehearsal every day, super energetic, never down, like never brought exhaustion into the room, was always super there for every rehearsal mentally. I mean, I don't know how she did that. I don't know how a lot of them do it. I mean, I have a lot of empathy for the amount of work that they do every day. Plus, they also want to experience being in college and doing all the things that go with college, being in sororities, being in fraternities, doing, going to the football games. This university offers a lot of different opportunities and events and programs. So they can curate their experience, how much they want to do, how much they don't want to do. I find it why I'm here is because I find it really interesting and I find the students really interesting. I love working with them. I love getting to know them. That's what's so interesting to me about teaching is developing relationships over time. Just to come in and teach a class one day here and there, that's not so much interest to me. It's more about really getting to know them, getting to know how they work, how to push them, how to get them to be more efficient in their dancing and their work so that they can discover more about themselves. So I hope
The
that kind of answers your
benefit.
question.
No, it's great. But that is like the benefit of the collegiate experience because you're not re-auditioning every year as like a trainee program or something like that, where it's a 1 year up and out, right? You've got
Right.
4 years to really dig in and get to know these students and help really move them forward.
Yeah. And we've got it's a small program. There's about 66, 67 dance majors. We're under 70. Our goal is to be kind of around that 70 number. We've got 9 full-time faculty. So, the faculty to student ratio is very low. I think it's like 6, 7 to 1. They get, and we rotate the faculty. So if you're having ballet with me in the fall, you're going to have ballet with a different teacher in the spring. So they get, but you get that concentrated semester with that teacher, but then you get another teacher to, that might push you in a different way and, make things, as we all know, people react differently to different teachers. So, sometimes you might make really good progress with me, but you're in the next semester with, somebody else and something maybe really clicks for you with that or vice versa. So
Right.
they get variety, but then they also get consistency, which I think is really great. They get a chance to really, get to know the professor, and the professor really gets a chance to know them and how they work and what they need.
So when you say 70, that's across the 4 years, right? So it's 18,
Correct.
around 18, 17, 18 a class. That's actually
Correct.
really great.
Yeah,
And
it's a really concentrated program.
what percentage would you say double major? Because I think that's really interesting just because of what we've heard other places about how hard it is to do.
It's about 60 something percent. It's a majority of
Okay.
the students. I mean, that's the reason that we get a lot of students is because they want to be able to double major. They want to they want to continue dancing, but they also want to, get their degree in psychology, or they want to do, advertising. We have a fantastic advertising school here. We also have a great psychology program. SMU has just a great program in general in terms of the academic work. We have a great business school that people do the business degree. That's a really demanding one because the business school is very very tough. We've had people do accounting. We've had multiple. We actually just had a mechanical engineer graduate the year before last. We've got another one and there's chemistry, English majors. They're just across the board where their interests lie, So it's
I think
quite,
that's really interesting.
yeah. We've got a real diverse group of people here, and I think the program really thrives off of that, having that. And it's different, sometimes, with the rehearsal schedules and the classes and everything, at the end of the 15 weeks, they're pretty spent, and so it's nice that they get the
Yeah.
break. But
So,
yeah.
on that note, you were talking about how you've got classes throughout the day and then rehearsals into the evening. Can you kind of take us through a typical day of a student who would be a BFA major?
Right. So in the first 2 years in our program, they're required to study ballet, modern, and jazz. And we've actually just added a requirement to take an Afro modern class as well, because we find that they need that diversification of movement for the field now. Every company is dancing, works across the board that are a blend of ballet, modern, contemporary, African-based movement. All of those things are now coming into every company. So we felt that was something that they needed to have as part of their process. So they do that in the first 2 years. They have to study the three techniques, and at some point they have to get that Afro modern credit in there. In their first semester as a first year student, we don't have them audition for the main stage show. We give them a semester to acclimate, but then they also work crew so that they learn, about the backstage side of, the performance process. And then for the next, 7 semesters, they're able to audition for the main stage shows. And so, they're in classes starting, if you're a first year and second year students, they have their ballet class at 9:30, Monday through Friday. They usually have modern in the afternoon. They have jazz on Tuesday, Thursday. They have their production course that they do production 1 in the fall, production 2 in the spring. They do a musical concepts class. They learn more about how to, count and be more engaged with music. They've also, I think in the second year, they also do a kinesiology class. So they learn more about how their body functions, how everything works and moves together, so that they can be, so they can understand their dancing from a kinesiological aspect. And I'm trying to think of what else they have in there. They have a dancer's toolbox class that goes through, kind of like building the resume, doing some community teaching. It's a wide ranging class in terms of things that they need as going into the profession. And so that they have that. And then, obviously that first semester, they're not rehearsing late at night. That kind of gives them a chance to, get their foothold in at the university, get to know, they're all around new people that they don't know. And then in the sophomore semester, that can really take off, whether they get, cast in that main stage show or not. They can also, in the first year, they can be a part of our Dance Works program, which is a student choreography program that the students choreograph on each other. Then they present the works to a faculty panel that adjudicates it and then chooses the works that are the strongest. And then that's performed in our large atrium area. We put down the floating wood floor and the Marley, and it's like a free lunchtime performance for people from across the university and the community to come in, see their work. And it's a really fun program. So then they're finally integrating into the, rehearsal time. And that can be in the staging period. That's basically usually like 2.5 weeks with a choreographer or a repetiteur. They're 6 to 10. Then we go, once that, staging period ends, then it's usually like, 2 to 3 nights a week of maintenance rehearsals, getting it ready for the stage. It looks a little bit different in their third and fourth year, excuse me. The requirement of the program, and this is what kind of allows the double major, is that they just have to have a technique class every day, and they can choose that. Most of the time they're doing 2 and 3 techniques. They're doing ballet and modern, or they're doing modern and jazz, or they're doing jazz and ballet. They just have to have the one technique class per day. And then that kind of opens up their schedule for more academic classes, for their other major. And then, most of the time they're getting, because they're upperclassmen and they're the stronger dancers, they're getting cast in a lot of the works. So they hopefully by that time they kind of know how to navigate that time management in getting their work done. You'll see them, they're rehearsing. The person says, "Oh, take 20 minutes. I'm going to work with this group." And you'll see them all over on the side. They pull out their laptops and they're, writing papers and working on stuff, around the back of the studio and whatnot. And then, "Hey, I'm going to need you in 5 minutes. Make sure you're ready." They're closing it off, they're stretching, and they're warming back up. So they're really learning how to kind of navigate that daily rehearsal grind, which we know happens in the profession as well. Sometimes they're working on a section that you're not in. You got to wait on the side, and you got to figure out how to stay warm and be ready when your section comes up for rehearsal. So, did that kind of answer your question about how they're going through the,
It does.
the
Okay,
kind of
so just to kind of clarify, so when they're upperclassmen, it's really just a like almost 100% performance-based program. Is that what I'm hearing?
well, they have to take
Yes,
technique
the
every
the
day.
tech
It just
the
depends,
technique every
right?
day. Yeah,
Right.
like a warm-up
But at
class
that
or
point,
whatever.
we're
But
we're hoping, they're at that point, they're 20 years old. They should kind of have more of a handle on how their technique flows. And so their classes, it goes from being very strict to kind of in the technique in the first 2 years to kind of now you need to start taking it over and you're using those classes to develop your artistry. And then you're also in your rehearsals. Nothing can ever simulate what it's like to be a professional dancer, to be in the studio for 8 hours a day, being in the company class at 10 o'clock and then finishing your rehearsals at, 5, 6 o'clock at night. And you're just dancing all day long. Nothing can simulate that. Dancers change so much. Once they become professionals, they change so much because you're dancing all day long. You're in those rehearsals and you're around people, and it's just such a different thing. And it's impossible to simulate. Even in the ballet school, we couldn't simulate exactly what it's like to be a dancer because you're taking classes and you're doing that. That's different than being in the rehearsal working on that same ballet for hours and hours and hours, and then you're on the stage, and then you're in a new thing, and then you're back on the stage. There's just so much that's different in the professional experience that develops them as dancers. Being around other dancers all the time, watching them. Oh, I love the way that so and so does that. How do I do that? That you can get that in classes too, but there's just that environment of being in the rehearsal studio is such a different thing. But we try to give them as much of a simulation as possible of what it's like to be in the professional world in terms of their, knowing how to rehearse, how to learn, how to be quick about starting to develop your character. Even if it's an abstract, there's some, you are some kind of person, human in that moment. And how do you begin to develop that works with that role? And how do you make it yours and interesting as a performer to an audience?
And now a brief pause to hear a word from our sponsors. We are now welcoming reviews of year-round ballet school programs on Ballet Help Desk, whether it's a full-time program, after school, a conservatory, or a company-affiliated school. We welcome all of them. If your dancer has been part of a program, please consider sharing your experience. Imagine there is a family out there right now trying to make an important decision, and your insight could help them feel more confident about their next step. Reviews are completely anonymous, and it takes just a few minutes to complete. And let everyone learn all about the good, the bad, and everything in between. And back to the episode. Well, and is that the difference of your program versus other collegiate programs where you are a very performance focused program? So you are focusing much more on that technique plus artistry to really simulate what it's like and get them ready for the field.
I think a lot of programs do that. I don't know if that's necessarily what stands out for us. I think our emphasis on them studying the ballet, modern, and jazz, and that we don't have tracks. So it's not you're in the ballet track, you're in the modern track. We don't categorize them in that way, if that makes sense. And I'm sure you can get that, training in the other things as you go through. When they go into that third and fourth year, they're curating what they want to do. So if they do want to concentrate more on the ballet, if they see that that's their path, I want to be in a ballet company, they can concentrate in that. If they feel like, dancing concert modern is their thing, they can concentrate, they can take more of those kind of classes. So it really, but a lot of them continue taking all three or a combination of the two because they want to be diverse movers. They want to be able to get cast in any kind of work that comes along once they start dancing professionally. I don't know, does that kind of answer what you were
So can I
asking?
just clarify, does your
Yeah,
BFA, it's a BFA in dance, it's not necessarily
dance
a BFA
performance.
dance performance. So
Yeah.
you could concentrate, like, of all of your BFA people, how many are concentrating on ballet specifically?
It depends on the class. You'll get some cohorts that are more, quote unquote, ballet oriented. I would say we've got like our rising junior class. I think there's quite a few that, they're always in the point classes, they're constantly cast in the ballet pieces. They're very into growing in that way. There's other classes where they kind of tend to drift a little bit, maybe more contemporary modern. And there's always people that want to they know they want to do Broadway or they want to do commercial work. So they tend to stay more, they're still taking ballet or they're taking modern, but they want to be in the jazz classes. They kind of figure out kind of where they're going. And there's some that are like, I'll take whatever job I can get. I want to dance. I don't care if I'm dancing at X ballet company or if I'm dancing in a touring contemporary company or if I'm be in the Rockettes or I'm going to be doing cruise line work or I'm doing, commercial work. So we've got a real diverse group of dancers, that have in their interest. But we always in our performances, we always have at least a ballet piece, a modern piece, and a jazz piece. So those three are always represented, and then I'm integrating more of getting more of the Afro modern diasporic kind of works also integrated into the program as well. So does that kind of help in understanding kind of how the program goes?
It does, because the majority of the programs that we have interviewed so far have been ballet specific. And
Right.
so,
Yeah, we're definitely not ballet specific. We have a very strong ballet program because we have really strong ballet professors here. We don't have like we don't say, oh, you look like a ballet dancer, you need to take ballet classes, and you look like a modern dancer and you need to take modern classes. It's much more at the beginning, the first 2 years, like get as good as you can in each of these. And then going forward, I can kind of see myself being, wanting to be a ballet dancer. I want to be in a ballet company or, or I want to be something different. We're definitely not concentrated in one aspect for like, we don't determine that for them, I guess, basically.
sure. And, Carter, here's the interesting part. I mean, my kid's going on her 4th year as a ballet dancer. She uses her classic jazz training so often. And they just did some Paul Taylor, because she just did Company B, and she got the incredible opportunity to dance Rum and Coke. She needed all of her jazz training to dance that, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I'm so glad that she had it. And so I think people, a lot of ballet dancers don't recognize the importance of having those other genre training in order to help them be a more well-rounded dancer.
Yeah. We had a student he was up at Chautauqua and he wrote to me and he said, it's been really interesting because a lot of the students that really only take mostly ballet all the time. He said, when the contemporary moving choreographers or someone that has more of a jazz take on it, he said that they really struggle. And he said he was so glad that he came to this program. He's like, because I feel like I can go into any choreographer's rehearsal and feel like I can relate to the way that they're moving because of the classes and everything that he got. And he was one of the people that took ballet, modern, and jazz basically every semester, while he was here. So I thought that was just an interesting observation of seeing, like, hey, I feel comfortable being in any kind of rehearsal space, with a choreographer. No matter how they want me to move, I feel like I can find that, that what they're looking for.
Well, what a nice comment for him to say about your program. That must have made you feel really good.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And he was a great student. So many times, I mean, we can give, when I was teaching at Miami City Ballet, Edward Villolo used to say, all we can do is give them the information. We give them the information. What they do with the information is up to them. But it was incumbent upon us to give them the information, to give them the correct information, to get, allow them to find themselves in it. But ultimately, it comes down to them doing the work. There's a quote about, somebody, saying thank you to Balanchine for promoting them up to soloist or whatever. And he said, why are you thanking me? you're the one who did the work. And I find that so true. Like, we can push all we want, but eventually that student has to say, this is what I want, this is where I'm going, and I'm gonna make it happen, you know?
All right, let's talk about the make it happen. So,
Yeah.
can you tell us all about SMU's performance schedule for the year? It says you have 4 performances on your website. What do they all look like?
Okay, so the first performance of the year is the student choreography one that I mentioned earlier called Dance Works. That's a student-led one. They create the pieces on each other, then it's adjudicated in front of a faculty panel who decides which work should go on the program. It usually ends up being like 6 or 7 pieces, and that's performed in our large open atrium area. We put down the floating wood floor, put down the Marley. It's a lunchtime performance. People bring in their lunches, they sit, they watch the show. It's usually about 45 minutes to an hour. And then in the fall, we have our main stage show, which usually takes place sometime in November. That usually looks like this fall. What I'm looking at is I'm bringing in Claire Kretschmer, who's the artistic director of Ballet Hartford, to choreograph. We're doing a Doug Verone work. We're hopefully doing a Jerome Robbins work. We're still getting all the details of that. And I'm bringing in one of the directors from one of the local companies to also choreograph a smaller work for the students. Then in the spring, we have our spring production that usually looks kind of like the fall. The spring is going to be all new choreography. So I'm bringing in, one of the local artistic directors, one of our faculty is choreographing, and I'm bringing in a choreographer from Spain who does really interesting contemporary work. Year we did Bournonville, we did the Potacis and the Tarantella from Napoli. We had Nicola Huba came in and coached them, just was the director of the Royal Danish Ballet for many years and then just stepped down recently. And we did a David Parsons work. We did some Limon this past year. We did the First Regiment from Balanchine Stars and Stripes. What else did we do? I brought in Durante Verzola from Miami City Ballet to choreograph a new work. So it's always some kind of mix of masterwork repertory, new choreography, trying to get them in front of artistic directors that are going to come in and be around them for weeks, to hopefully make those connections that can lead to jobs. We had Robert Battle was here choreographing 2 years ago, right after he had left Alvin Ailey. So we've got a lot of different people coming in and out that connect with the students and trying to give them different opportunities of learning repertory, but also being created on. So they have both of those
So
experiences.
I want to ask you about the student choreography. How many of your students have typically are indicating an interest in choreographing? Because I feel like everybody we talk to, especially at the collegiate level, they're talking to their students all the time about different career paths outside of performing, given how hard this industry can be. So can you talk a little bit about how your students get involved in learning how to choreograph and then actually presenting their work?
Yeah. And let me add one other thing. So at the last performance of the year is our senior dance concert, which is the end of the choreography track that they start in their junior year. So they start in junior year, they have composition 1, composition 2, and then in the senior year they have composition 3, and then they have their capstone. So that senior dance concert is the finishing of that comp track in capstone. They have to choreograph a fully realized work, any genre, but it's done on the main stage with lighting, with costume. They get that experience of what it's like to create a fully realized work that goes on a stage in front of an audience. That work begins obviously in that Comp 1 class, but they can come in, some of them come in and they're already interested in choreography. We had he's one of our rising juniors, and he did a engaged learning program. That's one of the things they offer here at SMU. And he got support to create a full evening length contemporary abstract work. And he booked a theater. He got dancers from this program, some of his friends, because he's from this area. And he created a full evening length work, and he got support from it. And it actually helped, covered some of his credits and whatnot that he needed for his degree. So, he was obviously very ambitious in his interest in choreography. And we've got some other people like that. So it just depends on, where their interests lie. Some people come in and they want to choreograph right away, and they show a real penchant for doing that. And then there's some dancers that just wait until they get into the composition track. And then they kind of discover, oh, this is actually really interesting. And then by the time they create their work, some of them are like, oh, I could really see myself doing this. And some of them are like,
Right.
I never want to do that again, because it's just not their thing. But, we had one of our seniors that graduated this year. I mean, he choreographed this really beautiful work. I said to him, I could really see that being a path for you. If all things, you never know what their path is going to be once they leave. But I mean, I was like, I would really encourage you to, continue looking at that because it was really, created a really dynamic, interesting, compelling work.
Yeah. And well,
Yeah.
and also, I think there's a lot of dancers who get an opportunity to choreograph and then go, I actually like doing this. And we've interviewed several of these people where they say, I actually like choreographing and creating more than I do being choreographed on and dancing. And so, I think it's great when students have a lot of opportunities to do that. On the flip side, how do you work with the kids who get in there and they're like, I don't want to do this?
The choreography,
Yeah.
well, it's kind of like, we just support them. We've got faculty mentors that help, that help each of the choreographers. And so, they go in and once you start doing it, it might not be your favorite thing, but I mean, every time, they always create something and they create something that's, that works on the stage. I mean, with choreography, it's so subjective. Like I might look at something and go, it doesn't really appeal to me. But then I hear from 3 or 4 people that were in the audience. They're like, I just love so and so's work. Great. You know, I mean, that happens in professional companies, right? You bring in a
All the
choreographer and
time.
you got people in the audience that go, oh my God, that was terrible. And somebody feel that that was the best thing I've ever seen. So I mean, it's so subjective what connects with us. That was part of that some of our conversations we've been having about how do we guide them without trying to put our aesthetic on what they're doing, right? How do I guide somebody, but not, I don't want them to choreograph like me or, we don't want them to choreograph like so and so. But how do I help them at least focus their voice so that they can create a work that makes sense and says something?
Yeah, no, I think that makes a lot of sense. What about any kind of a teaching track? We've talked to a couple of schools where they actually train students to become dance teachers. Do you guys have any kind of a track like that?
So we don't have a track, but they do have to study pedagogy. So they have a semester of learning how to teach. And the way that class goes is they choose the modality that they feel most comfortable teaching. So you might have somebody who teaches a ballet class, works on, how do you teach a ballet class? You might have somebody who works on how do I teach a contemporary class? Somebody who's like, how do I teach a heels class? How do I teach a tap class? It's not modality specific. It's what interests the student, and then how do I become a better teacher? How do I learn how to connect with students? So it's a great class that they take. It usually in their sophomore or junior year. And then they also there's another in one of our other classes. They have one of the parts of it is teaching down at the Methodist church down the street, and they have a great ministry for working with learning, cognitive differences. And so they actually work and learn how to teach with the people that are in that program there. So there's multiple opportunities to learn how to work and pass along what you know as a dancer of that. So we don't have a necessarily a teaching track. It's actually something that we've been talking about doing, either looking at working with our education school, which is Simmons, to get that maybe where they could get the K through 12 certification, for teaching dance. And then also maybe a master's degree in pedagogy or something, so that there's some other avenues for learning how to be a better teacher, because we could all use better teachers.
And now, time for a quick ad break. Summer intensives are coming fast, and we just published our Summer Intensive Essentials Guide over on our website. We focused on products dancers really rely on, the things that set them up for an incredible summer. Everything in it has been used by real dancers at real programs, and wherever we could, we made a point to include products from dance-run businesses because we love supporting people who are building something in this industry. And don't forget to pick up our very own corrections journal to help you have an amazing summer. Some of these links are affiliate links, so shopping through our guide is a great way to support the show at no extra cost to you. You'll find the links in our show notes or head over to our website, ballethelpdesk.com.
Now, back to the episode.
So, can we talk a little bit about the audition process? And, from what we understand at most schools, students have to be admitted academically and also artistically. But can you talk about how that works at SMU?
Yeah, same deal here. It's a dual admit, where they have to audition for our program to get in, but then they also have to apply to the regular university to, get in there as well. It helps if you've done the audition and we're saying yes, we want them to be in the program here. That helps them get into the university as a whole. Our audition, we do, a ballet bar and a little center. They then do a modern combination, they do a jazz combination, and then this year we're adding an Afro modern combination, diasporic movement, so that we can really see the diversity of their movement. What we look for are dancers that are very expressive. They don't necessarily have to have all the technical foundation. Like we can help them with that once they get into the program. But we look for people that are really dynamic movers that have an understanding of how their body moves in an expressive way. We can look past the deficits in the technique because we can bring that in. But if they're very blank and they're not giving a lot of expression in their movement, that's not the kind of dancer that we're looking for. So yeah, that's basically how it goes. We have 4 on-campus, live auditions. We also accept video auditions that the students we provide the combinations and the music, and then they do that just so that we get an equitable sense of how they move. So we're not seeing somebody doing X person's movement. We're seeing them in the way that the faculty here teaches, so that we can kind of look at them equally in the way that they move through the combinations. So
Do you do a pre-screen, or are
we
the
don't.
4 auditions they're open call?
Yeah, yeah. They just have to
Okay.
register and
And
come.
what kinds of backgrounds do your dancers have? Like, are they primarily coming out of ballet schools? Are they coming out of more like multi-genre competition studios? Like, what's their background look like?
I think the answer to that is yes. They're coming from ballet schools. They're coming from. I think we've got one first year student that's coming in that was just at SAB. We've got kids that are coming from competition schools. Got students that are coming from performing arts high schools. We find them. There are 2 that are coming in that I saw at NYCDA and emailed them, and they ended up coming to the program. Like I said, I was just at the Dance One convention, this weekend for their end of year, and they have a big college audition. And so I, offered, multiple dancers acceptance into the program from that. So they're just coming from all over everywhere, and they come from all over the country. So we've got students from across the country here and from a variety of training backgrounds.
Wait, can we
Um,
back up for one second? You said
yeah.
something interesting that you were just in Las Vegas and you offered a couple of dancers acceptance into the program. So let's say I'm a dancer at one of these, at a convention or one of these programs,
Mhm.
and you came up to me. What's the conversation you're having with me?
So sometimes there is a conversation, so they have the ones that we go to, they have a specific college audition day. So we're seeing them, take a ballet class. We're seeing them do a modern contemporary thing. We're seeing them do jazz. And so it went from, when did we start? 7:30 in the morning until I think 1 or something like that, with a little lunch break in there. And then we had the college fair afterwards. So some of them came to the table and talk to us, and so I was able to give some more background. And some of the ones that kind of stood out to me came to the table. Some of the ones that stood out to me didn't come to the table. So I didn't necessarily get a chance to talk with some of them. I just sent them an email saying, hey, I was really impressed with your work. Think you'd be a great fit for our program. I hope you'll consider it. Well, you don't need to audition. I've already seen you do that. We're accepting you, and you'll be considered for as much scholarship opportunities as you qualify for as we go forward. So it kind of looks like that. Sometimes I'm talking to them, they want to know more about the program. Sometimes there's not really an opportunity to speak with them, until after I email, and then they'll email back and say, "Hey, can I know more about the program?" And then that's like, there's one of our first year students that's coming in. She was at NYCDA. I remember, I think I said one thing to her like, "Oh, you're doing really beautiful work," or something like that, and then sent her an email, and then she learned more about the program and was actually looking at a different school, but came and visited, watched, took some classes, came to the campus, and by the end of the day was like, this is where I want to be. I want to be at SMU. So that happens a lot. If we can get them on campus, a lot of times they'll be like, oh, I can really see myself here. Once they see the level of the classes, they see the students working with the professors, or they're in the class, they're like, oh, this is really great, and I can see myself here. And it doesn't happen every time,
Yeah.
but it happens a lot. So it
So
kind of looks like that.
once
Yeah.
that happens, do they then they still have to apply to the university, correct?
Correct. So
Okay.
the only thing I can offer them is acceptance into the division of dance, into our dance program. And then they do have to apply to the university. And then that's when it gets into, what do your grades look like? We're test optional. So if you're not a great test taker and your SAT wasn't good, or your ACT, or, whatever, you don't have to put that in. And it doesn't help or hurt if you don't have that in there. It's totally optional. It can just go off of your GPA, how you're doing in school, and some other factors. So then they apply to the school, and then once they get in, then there's a whole different level of stuff, in terms of what they qualify for, in terms of scholarship, academically, artistically, and different things. So
How closely do you work with the admissions office if you've got like kids that you really, really want to bring into the program? How, like, my background's in sports, right? And so
right.
recruited athletes, the coaches will, pick up the phone and call the admissions office. What kind of a relationship do you have with the admissions office if you have specific dancers you'd really like to see in the program?
Well, luckily, so we have our own admissions office here in Meadows. So I work closely with a person there that oversees. There are multiple people that oversee the different divisions. So the person I work with, she oversees dance, and I think part of theater. And there's another one that does music, and then one that does film, and da da da. All, because there's a whole bunch of different divisions that make up the School of the Arts. So I work with her. She then also works with central admission. So I'll go to her. I'll say, hey, we really like this kid, super highly rated. We would really like to have this student in our program. Then she'll go to central admission and be like, hey, this is somebody, can we really take a, strong look at this person? Da, da. And sometimes it works out and we're able to change some things around, and sometimes it doesn't. It just depends. It's very similar to the athletes, although I think probably sometimes the athletes get a little bit more wiggle room maybe than the artists. I mean, we have, a few hundred people come to our performances, and the football players have, 30,000 people coming and watching their
Right,
thing.
right.
So there's a little difference there.
So then, do you guys offer merit-based scholarship for the dance performance, or is it only academic merit-based scholarships?
No, there's both. So we can offer artistic merit-based, super strong, really, looks like a lot of potential, da 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 da. Those numbers can go up. And then, I mean, what's really fantastic is when they score high on the academic side, and they're really strong artistically, that gives us a lot of latitude to offer, really strong packages.
Yeah. And I know it's individual to each student and all of those kinds of things. And so, like, like all things in ballet, it depends.
Correct.
So then we talked a little earlier that your typical class are somewhere between 15 and 20 students. Yeah, per. What is your split male female?
Well, so our incoming class, I think, is 14. 2 of them are male. So it's usually something. My goal every year is to get at least 3 male dancers into the program per cohort. So, in any given 4 years, there's at least 12 male dancers in the program. We haven't hit that in a while. Getting male dancers is really has become, I think, harder over time. There's some, it just depends. But getting,
Say
we've
more about
had
that. What do
some.
you mean?
Well, I think there's also, especially for this program in the BFA, and sometimes the rigor of the academic, sometimes that's not what guys are looking for. And I think they're a lot of times, I don't know how to say it. Like, I think they're looking for a program. I think sometimes they just want to dance, right? So it's not. We had a guy a couple years ago, really super talented, and after the first year, he was like, the academic stuff just isn't for me. He's like, I really just want to dance, right? So he went to a different program after his first year. But we've also got some that are like, this is, we have a one guy in the program right now who hadn't done formal education in 4 or 5 years. He was doing correspondence at because he was at a program connected, a ballet intense program. So he hadn't been in a classroom, I think, since, middle school. So coming back into an academic environment was really intimidating for him at the beginning. By the end of the year, he was like, I love this. I mean, he's like, I love the training I'm getting. I love that I'm, expanding my mind and I'm learning so much. So, I mean, there's, two people on complete opposite ends. So I don't know why the trend for us has been kind of more difficult getting male dancers, because I know there are some programs that have quite a few. I guess taught at Indiana University quite a few years ago. They had a whole bunch of guys. Heard that I think it's the University of Arizona has a really strong program with a lot of male dancers in it. So I don't know. I think these things kind of go in they go in waves, they go in cycles. Where program can become very popular, and then a lot of people want to go there. So it's something I'm working on to try to get a more robust amount of male dancers into our program. But it's just right. I'm only going in my second year as chair, so
Well, we
so it's
also heard
I've only had one.
we heard too that at least with the ballet side of things, we've been told over and over again that COVID wiped out male dance programs. That like
Well,
boys were
yeah,
dropping out at a much greater clip than the women were.
mm,
And so I
yeah.
wonder if you're starting to see like those kids are now hitting college age and there just aren't as many of them because they all kind of
That
disappeared.
Yeah, that could totally be true. I mean, there's just a lot of programs, right? And we're looking for a high caliber of dancer. But I was just being in Vegas at the Dance One. I mean, there were nice amount of guys there. Some of them really, a lot of them really strong. But one's already committed to Juilliard, and one is going da da da.
Hmm.
And maybe they don't see this program as being a fit for them. Maybe they want to go more commercial, or they want to be in. Sometimes it's also geographic, right? It's like, I just want to be in New York. I think there's a lot of jobs there, and that's where I want to be. So,
Sure.
saying like there was a guy. I mean, we were right down to the end. He went to a different university because he said that his grandmother lived 30 minutes away, and he wanted to go have Sunday dinner with his grandma a lot.
That's really
So,
nice.
yeah. So it's like, okay, I totally get that. Like there's the, there was a first year student that had committed, and then she got an offer from Rambert in London at the last minute. She was like,
Wow.
I think I want to go study in London for a year. I thought, yeah, I totally can understand that. Now but I said to her, well, you can defer. And she said, oh, I can? I said, yeah. So actually, so she did put in a deferment for a year. I was like, go try, be in London. Maybe that's a thing you'll love. Maybe after a year, you won't. We had another guy, he got in, but he was already at a training program at the European Ballet School, I think in
Hmm.
Amsterdam.
Yeah.
Anyway, but he deferred for a year, and then, I contacted him. He was like, I want to get a job. I want to dance in a ballet company, and that's where I want to go. He's like, I love your program, but I want to dance professionally right now. Totally get it. That's what I did. I mean, I got out of high school, I got a job.
Hmm.
So, I mean, I totally understand that path, and that, that thinking of you go right out of the ballet school and you go into a company, right?
Well,
You
but
start,
hold on. Okay,
building
so
that up.
let's talk about
Yeah.
it a little bit more
Yeah.
because that is kind of changing, right? You're not getting out of a ballet program and getting a job most of the time. There are exceptions to the rule, and I can't speak to this as a known entity because my kid did get a job right out of school. So I just like to put that as a disclaimer because it happens
Hmm.
very rarely, but it did happen to her. But the majority of students who are coming out are spending multiple years in a trainee program. So when people are really trying to weigh the difference, what are you seeing with your students or your prospective students as they're talking to you about this? Are they weighing a traineeship versus coming to your school? And how do you have that conversation with them about the benefits of going to college versus the benefits of doing a trainee program?
Yeah. Well, I think it's such a tricky thing, but what I say is, a lot of times if you go the trainee route, you're maybe in the trainee program for 2 years, and then maybe you become an apprentice, and then maybe you're a second year apprentice. And so by the time you get in the company, it's been 5 years since graduated high school or wherever. I mean, because people sometimes are, they're going to the training program sometimes at 16 or 17. So they're young. It just depends. Are they going in at 18 into that program? Are they going in at 16? So you're looking at, 4 or 5 years sometimes before you finally get that paying position. And the way I look at it is, you can do 4 years where you're paying that dance company, and then when you're done with that program, are you getting the job? Are you getting into the company? Are you getting into another company? Or do you do your 4 years in college, and by the end of the program, you've got a degree that you can use for the rest of your life? BFA holds a lot of weight because it's a high credit hour degree. There's more rigor behind it than a lot of times than, say, a BA or a BS. So when you go and apply for a job, someone looks at, oh, BFA. You did a lot of hours. There was a lot of rigor involved in this. Just because it's a degree in dance performance doesn't mean that you're limited to only doing dance. You can use that to parlay into anything. I mean, I know so many people that got degrees in one thing and then ended up working in a field that was completely different than the field that they were in. Somebody who was pre-med and then ended up working in advertising for Puma for 20 years. You just never know. But you always have that degree. It never goes away, right? The dancing portion is always really short. And so obviously we have to do it when we're young. But, once you graduate, so I danced when I was in Kansas City Ballet. There was actually a dancer that got hired from SMU. She had graduated from this program, and then she auditioned for the company and she got in. So she went right from being at the 4-year program to dancing directly into the main company. We have people doing that all the time. We also have people that, like, we have one that's in Ballet Austin right now. She went, after she graduated, she got into the second company. She did that, and then they hired her into the main company, which is very typical for that company. I don't know if you know a lot, but Ballet Austin tends to filter them through the second company because they like to get them working in a certain way. That's one of the programs actually I kind of am partial to, because I feel like they actually it's like it becomes a fruitful thing for those dancers that go into the second company, because a large percentage of them end up in the professional company, in the main company afterwards. So, they're, and when the seniors are graduating, I tell them, everybody's path is different. Some people, there's like Jenny, like you said, there's that rare person that they're here and they audition and they're in the job. And that's the place that they want to be. It usually looks something like, I'm here, and then I go here, and then I'm over here, and then I'm back over there, and then I'm up here, and and then I finally get to the place that I want to be. There was a woman that I knew. This is years ago when I was dancing, and she was an apprentice at Kansas City Ballet when I was there, and she just had a really hard time getting a job. She had been at, Walnut Hill, P&B school, blah, blah, blah. And then she got an apprenticeship, I think, with Pittsburgh Ballet Theater. I mean, we're talking like 30 something years ago, more. And then just happened to take an audition, it just was a real struggle to trying to find that paying position, and was finally offered a job at Pittsburgh Ballet Theater, but just happened to take an audition for San Francisco Ballet and got in. And this was after being at multiple places, as an apprentice, couldn't get in, da 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 da. And then all of a sudden, boom, she gets a job at San Francisco Ballet, which was like her dream job. So, but it wasn't like she went right from the ballet school there. She was like here and over here and down here and blah, 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 and then she finally made it to the place that she wanted to be. And I find that tends to be more of the way that things happen. I mean, we all know the dancers that go directly, they go to the school, they go through that, and then they end up in the company, and they either, stay in the core, or they just happen, or they're able to rise up and, and get promoted and move on. But there are many ways to succeed in this business, and there's a lot of different paths you can take. I love the thing about coming to college, because they can, like I said, you get the degree, it's with you for the rest of your life. And in our program, you can get that second one as well at the same time. Doesn't cost you anything more. It's the same amount, but you come out with 2 degrees. So I've got my BFA in dance, and I've got my computer science degree, and then I can, navigate my life after college in multiple ways. We have people that go on and they're dancing professionally. And then there's some that are, after their college experience, are like, I think that was it for me. I had a great time. I love dancing the works I danced, but I think I see myself doing something different at this point. They're all just so different because they're different people. So we've got the ones that are driven and they're like, I want to get in the company, and then they do. They're out, they're auditioning, and they're a Rockette now, or they're in the contemporary company in Chicago that's touring. There's one on Broadway. There's one that's in Ballet Austin. There's so they're just all over the place. They're doing cruise ships, or whatever. It's a lot
I
of
love
different
how
paths out there.
Yeah, and I love how eclectic it sounds like your student body is. Like Jenny was saying before, we've talked to a lot of schools, like we've talked to Indiana and some of the other kind of hardcore ballet schools, but you guys are one of the first dance programs we've talked to where it's a little more eclectic and not everybody is necessarily a bunhead.
Hmm.
That must be a little bit challenging from like a career planning standpoint, because you've got all these different kinds of students who want to do all these different kinds of things. How do you guys work with your students to kind of map out what a career might look like after they
Yeah.
graduate?
Well, we talk to them. We have faculty mentors. Ex faculty will have, 4 or 5 mentees. The next faculty has like 4 or 5, so we divide the students amongst the faculty, but they can go to anybody, right? They're not restricted to only speaking to that mentor. So they'll go in, they'll meet, they talk with, this ballet faculty, and you'll say, oh, I could see you at this company. I can call that director, or I can email that rehearsal director, or encourage them. I think you should go and do that summer program there, and let them see that you've got an interest, and see if they're interested in you. So, we encourage them, like in the summers, to do, a lot of different things. Some of them are going to Europe and they're studying there in programs. Some are going to ballet companies. Some are going to, like the Boca Ballet one, where they bring in the, multiple artistic directors in the
I love
summer. So
that
you get
program.
chance.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's
we
a great
totally
program. It's a
love that.
small program. Yeah. And we've had multiple dancers do that. Like I said, the one guy, he was going to Chautauqua. They're doing intensives here with some of the local companies. We've got multiple professional dance companies here in the Dallas area. There's Texas Ballet Theater, there's Bruce Wood Dance Dallas, there's Pegasus Contemporary Ballet, there's Avant Chamber Ballet, there's Dallas Black Dance Theater. They have a second company as well. There's a lot of local opportunity. I think we've got a couple dancers, alums that have just gotten hired by a couple of those companies. So there's local opportunity, and then then they're going off, and I think one got a job with Giordano for next year, and one is alumni is dancing with Dance Kaleidoscope in Indianapolis. Our faculty they're still active in the field. So we all have a lot of contacts, and we can email people, hey, I've got this dancer, da, 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 da. Would you be, could they come and, audition, or really recommend them? That doesn't guarantee anything, but we definitely do some legwork and try to connect them with possibilities for employment after.
So, are you assigned a mentor your freshman year, and then you work with that mentor for all 4 years? Like, how does that mentorship work? Can you explain that? Because
Yeah,
that
that's
sounds really
exactly.
interesting.
So we do it at the end of their first year is when we assign them to a mentor. It used to be called advising, now we call it mentoring, because it was also part of making sure that they were on track in terms of their courses and whatnot. That's kind of been taken over by advising. Now it's really just the faculty being mentors to these students and working with them on, hey, bring in your resume, let me look at it. Let's look at your headshot. Let's look at your dance shot. Let's and a lot of them, because of social media, right? They're already on Instagram. I'm hearing from more and more that's the place that jobs are happening a lot now, is that people see their stuff on Instagram. We have one student that got during her sophomore year, she got an invite to a Hamilton audition through her Instagram. They
Oh,
saw her
that's
stuff
so
and they were like,
cool.
yeah, they were like, hey, come audition for us. So she did the audition. She was like, I'm going to do it. I'm not going to leave the program. I don't want to, be halfway through and leave for a job. I'm gonna finish my program, but I want to do it for experience and to know what that's like to be in that kind of an audition. You know,
So, for
so
your students that do get a job, I'm so sorry. I'm just gonna
yeah,
pivot
no,
for
no,
just a second.
yeah, sure.
Like, do you have students that leave and come back? Would
So we
she,
actually
if she,
haven't.
okay. So
Yeah, no,
let's
yeah,
say she went to that Hamilton audition and she got it, and it was like a
yep.
6-month touring contract.
Hmm.
Should she leave and then come back? Could she take a leave of
Well,
absence?
absolutely. Yeah. And it would be doing a deferment or something, where you would say, okay, I'm going to take a year and then I'll come back in the program and da 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 da. I mean, we have had some students where they've taken a year, like especially after COVID. where we had some students who were like, I'm not, it was such a wild experience. They were like, I need some time after dealing with that whole thing. And then they came back and finished their degree later after, taking a year. Or I think there was actually one that she took a couple of years. She worked, she did some things, and then she was like, I really want to finish my degree. So then she came back and she finished it. So it is possible. It's possible to, to go and, like you said, if she did that and, did Hamilton for a year on tour, and then, wanted to come back in. She'd just come back in where she left off in a different cohort. So it'd be, she would be with different people because her,
Sure.
her class probably would have graduated and everything already, depending
Sure, sure,
on
sure.
how long it was.
Okay, so back to the mentors. How many times a year does everyone meet with their mentor, and what does that look like in practice?
It depends. I try to encourage them to meet with their mentors as much as possible. There's usually, if they're not doing that, there's usually like 1 or 2 times per year, when you get close to registering for classes for the next year and whatnot, that the faculty will reach out to them and say, hey, we really need to meet so we can talk about your coursework and and everything else. I would encourage them. And they also come in to meet with me a lot. They're like, hey, can I come in and talk to you about what I'm looking at auditions and. So they're usually doing touch points with a lot of different faculty throughout the year. And then sometimes the faculty say, hey, come in. I want to talk to you about what I'm seeing. I've been working with you in this rehearsal and I could really see you in X company. So I want to talk to you about what that would look like and what you need to do if you're interested in pursuing that, what you would need to do to kind of make yourself interesting to that director. So it just really depends. It depends on how much the motivation from the student in connecting with the faculty. And then, I think those touch points are happening quite a bit during the year, but it's happening across multiple faculty. It's not just necessarily with that one mentor, if that sort of makes sense.
That does make sense. So we all know the job market is really tricky out there for everyone. And then on top of that, for dancers it's a very difficult time with reduction in funding and things like that. So what are some common struggles that you're seeing with your graduates, your recent graduates, or your up and coming graduates as they make that leap into the professional dance world?
I think it's just getting that first contract at a place. I always tell them they have to have that tough skin. You might get 10, 12, 15 no's. You only need one yes. But getting that one yes is sometimes the hard one. And also that sometimes, if you want to be at a place, go to that place. You want to be dancing in Chicago, you want to be in New York, you want to be in LA, go there. Get integrated into the community. The dance world is very small. You go in, you start taking some classes, somebody a couple of days later, they're like, oh, I keep seeing you here. They introduce themselves. Oh, I'm doing a project, I did, like it can be like we just had an alum and he graduated, gosh, I think he probably in 2020. So the, year after pandemic, and he got a job right away with a company, did really work out, but he's been and it was in the New York area. He's kind of doing this and that. And he was like, you know what? I just don't think the New York dance scene is going to really happen for me. I think maybe I need to move on. And fast forward a week, I'm getting a call from an artistic director saying, hey, can you give me a recommendation on this guy? Oh yeah, talk to Okay, well, I'm hiring him. So now, he just got the job, but it was kind of like this, with all the things, moving to New York, he had the job, didn't really work out. The company went through some artistic transition, and we all know that happens, right? I get the job and then all of a sudden the director changes and then the new director comes in and then maybe they don't like me as much as the old director did, blah, blah, so it can be, there's so many factors that go into it. But I think the biggest challenge is just that, what they always talk about is just the unknown, right? You've been in a place for 4 years. Now, oh my God, I'm not coming back here next year. Wait, this has been my, I've just had that steady knowledge that I'm going back to this place all the time. Now, after May, oh, I'm not coming back here. I'm going to be doing something else. And sometimes not having that solid contract right away can be very intimidating, but they usually figure it out. And I've heard that from alums from multiple years where, they were, they're going, oh my God, I got to have this job by May. And then, May comes and they don't have the job. But eventually, oh, hey, got a contract with Lamone, or I got the contract with Mark Morris. And then I did that. And then that led to this job and da, 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 and then all of a sudden I'm in the company that I want to be in, and I'm doing the kind of work I want to do. So,
Yeah.
excuse
So
me,
I actually have two
scratchy voice.
questions about that. So I'm going to ask you the
Hmm.
first one, and then we'll go to the second one. You mentioned something about, one job leads to another. One of the things Jenny and I talked about all the time, like especially when parents ask us questions, is how important it is to learn how to network, and understanding that so many of it may be your first job, but your second, your third, your fourth job invariably comes from your network. How do you talk to your students, because they're in this college bubble for so long,
Hmm.
and it's a small program, right? And so kids who are coming out of college with, liberal arts degrees or business degrees or whatever, there's a huge network of alums that are in those industries. But how do you talk to your students about leveraging that network?
So we actually have a whole program. We have what is it called? The Heggie Center. It's an alumni networking program here. There's a whole mentoring program to connect current students with alums that are working in the field. So if you're interested in being in New York, we're connecting you to the alums in New York. And we do a trip in their senior year in January, right before the spring semester starts, to New York, where the students stay there for about 5-6 days during the American Presenters and Promoters. Is that what it's called? The APAP, showcase, for companies as they do their performances to get touring gigs and whatnot. So we take them to New York. They have a whole day at Gibney. We bring in a teacher. They have a person that comes and talks to them about being in the field, but then also how to transition out once they're done dancing, all the resources that are available for them there. But then they kind of curate their own experience. They can go take classes here, there. They can go see companies. Oh, I didn't even know that company existed. It's really great. I might want to dance there. So it gives them and then we have a big alumni reception. So we've got alumni coming in that all dance and work in the New York area, or sometimes from other places. There's some that fly in from LA or whatever. And so they get a chance to meet with a lot of alumni there. And then we also, during their capstone class, we bring in some alums to talk to them, like through Zoom conversations, or, sometimes they're in town and they come in, and so that they can connect with different alums through. So it's like a multi-pronged approach to getting them in front of alums that are already in the business or have worked in the field, still active in the field, so that they can there's a lot of ways for them to connect with people that are from the program that are working in the industry.
That's interesting. So that's sort of one direction, right? Which is them getting connected by the school with alums. But what about once they get out into the working world? Because I don't think networking is necessarily a skill that is not learned. And so how do you talk to your students about the importance of this as they move through their career? Not only networking to get a job, but also understanding that sometimes you have to give things too.
Trying to think how to answer that, because I think they kind of, they get some of that here, where we talk about connecting with people. And I'll give an example. There was a student. When did he graduate? 2021 or 22. And there was a guy who had come in to choreograph, and he was literally emailing him, every couple of months. Hey, just checking in. Really, really enjoyed working with you. Hope your projects are going well. Da 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 da. Once he graduated, this guy has gotten him, I think, 3 or 4 different jobs, because he, by doing that networking, just keeping that connection. And he was like, oh, hey, I'm choreographing this show for summer stock here. Come audition. Came and auditioned, got that job. Oh, now I'm doing this job here. And I think, also, I think I mentioned this, with the Instagram, I think that they're really good about trying to forge connections and getting in touch with people. And you mentioned one person, and they're like, oh, yeah, I'll look them up. And then they're sending a message, and they're connecting with this person, and then that leads to a thing. And then when they're there, they're talking with other people. So I think we do a pretty good job about making them aware that they need to cultivate their connections, while they're here, but then also once they leave. And they call, they'll email, they'll call. Sometimes they're like, hey, do you know about X place? Do you know this person?
Well, but I think
You know,
also the thing
yeah.
that you've mentioned as a through line through this conversation that Brett and I talk about a lot, that a lot of parents don't totally believe us on, is the casualness in which all of this happens, where it's just like
the teacher who is subbing for the class that you're taking is, comes up, is like, hey, what are you doing this year? I got this project,
Hmm.
blah, blah, blah. And then all of a sudden it's like, I like your movement. I like this. I think I'd like to hire you. And, and to learn how to have those very casual conversations, but also maintain interest. I mean, it is a skill. And so it sounds like you are talking to your students too about like keeping yourselves open and receiving that kind of feedback and processing it in a more strategic way.
Yeah, no, I think they get that. I think they get that for sure. I find a lot of times they're very savvy. I mean, there's some that, I mean, there's some that are so organized. I mean, they got their notebook and they've got all the companies lined, and they got a whole spreadsheet, and they know that this company is here, and this is the director, and this is what they do, and they've got it all categorized out. There's some dancers that look at that and they're like, oh my god, that's not my, I can't do that. That's like too, it's like almost too much for them. They're like, I can't handle all that data. I don't want to look at a giant spreadsheet of all these companies, and it gets a little bit overwhelming. And they're always asking me. I said, I've some of the personal advice I got when I was, in their position. I think you cast a wide net. I think you audition for a lot of different things, because you never know what's going to be the one that somebody finds you interesting. But another person he told me, start at the top and work your way down. He's like, don't audition for the tiniest company first and then take that job. He was like, go for the big thing first, then work your way down. And then eventually, you can work your way to different places. I've had students, over the years that, they started in X company, and then they auditioned and they moved from being in St. Louis Ballet to being in the Royal New Zealand Ballet. I mean, that's a huge switch, but they started out in this company, they learned, got better, blah, 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 and then they were able to reach a higher potential at once they got out into the field.
Right. So when, you hit on something interesting. You were talking about project work, right? And you were talking about how your students will come out of school and they'll move to a city. You encourage them to move to the city where you want to work and then start picking up project work.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that happens when kids are in those situations is you've got very young people with gaps in revenue, right? Or gaps in income. How do you talk to your students? Like, do you guys do any kind of financial literacy coaching to help them understand that you may only be working X number of months at a time, and then you're not working, and you have to budget and you have to learn to deal with those gaps? Like, how do you talk to your students about that?
Well, luckily that's part of the university curriculum. So they have classes in that are provided by the university. So we don't
Do
even
they
necessarily have
really?
to provide. They do, yeah. There's
Are they
a
required?
whole, yes, it's a required class that they have to take
Oh,
about financial literacy and whatnot. So yeah, it's part of the development of them as a person. So I mean, we can talk about some of that stuff in our division, but it's actually held university wide. Actually, because I finished my undergrad degree here as a adult with family, and I had to take the course. It was required. So they're getting a lot of that, and they understand that sometimes they're going to have to work at SoulCycle, or
right.
maybe some of them are been getting their Pilates certification, so they can teach private Pilates classes, and that can help supplement their income. I say that's one of the things we've been talking about, is getting the Pilates certification, in the program, so that those that are interested and can do that, or maybe even yoga certification. So when they're going out, they've already got some alternative revenue stream possibilities besides just a lot of them work anyway. So they've already, they've done the waiting tables. They've been like a childcare person. They're doing a lot of different things to supplement their income. I think that's one of the things and all those dancers that are doing training programs are probably doing the same thing, right? I mean, they're doing that. They're there all day, but then maybe they work a job at night, or they're teaching. Sometimes they're teaching at a couple of dance studios a couple nights
Yeah.
a week, to supplement their income. So I think they know how to kind of diversify their revenue streams. And I would say that's another one of the things when they connect with the mentors, of alums, they're giving them that advice as well. They're like, hey, like, I have this project. It lasted X amount of weeks. I got paid this, but then I've been building my Pilates clientele. And now I've got 6 or 7 people that I work with exclusively and privately. And that gets me through the times when the projects aren't there or whatever. So
Right.
they're able to connect in with those people. Our alumni network is really a wonderful, all schools have alumni networks, but I think we have a really robust one. And I think we've done a really good job. I think SMU has done a good job of really trying to cultivate those opportunities to connect with alums from each school. So if I'm in Meadows, I'm connecting with people from Meadows. If I'm in Cox School of Business, I'm connecting with alums from Cox School of Business. And if I'm in both schools, I'm connecting with both of those. So, there's a lot of crossover that happens at the university, which I think is also another advantage of doing this, because you're expanding the amount of contacts and alums that you can connect into once you're not here anymore.
Well, and it also sounds like you guys are doing it more proactively than we've heard from some other schools we've talked to.
It's a big push here. It's a big push here to connect to alums, to connect to people. They want the university as a whole, the division, of course, but the university as a whole wants these students to come out of here with jobs, right? So there's a big push to make that happen. Obviously, in the arts, it's a little different. It doesn't function necessarily like the business school or the engineering, or those are kind of different entities. But we're making a concerted effort to get them in front of people that can help them get jobs. That's one of the things when I started, I said, I really want to get people in choreographing and working with the students that are artistic directors, just to have that, to have two to 2.5 weeks where you're working with these people, so that, at the end, they might be like, once you graduated, please come audition for me. I would love to see you in the company. And then if they, with the companies, what's so hard is that they never know what positions they're going to have, right? They might have all their dancers come back and they're like, I don't have any job. I don't have any openings, unless they're firing somebody or somebody leaves or retires and they're not aware of it. You just don't know how many jobs you have year to year.
Mhm.
Right? Depends on the attrition. And then is that the person, are you the person they're looking for? I tell when the students come in, I said, they're looking for somebody that's 5'7" and you're 5'4", you're probably not going to get the job. It has nothing to do with your dancing. It's just you're not what they're looking for to fill that position, who they need. I tell them when I got into Kansas City Ballet, the audition at SAB, and when I got there, they were like, "Oh, you're the new so-and-so." I won't say his name on the thing. You're the new so-and-so. And it turned out he was the same height as me, had dark hair. We looked almost exactly alike. And that's because he had been let go from the company. And so they filled like for like. That doesn't always
Mhm.
happen, but it happens a lot, especially in ballet companies. Modern companies, maybe not so much, but in ballet companies, for sure. It's like, oh, I need a tall guy. I need a tall girl. I need a short guy. I need a short woman. Sometimes it's you have to fill what they need. If you're not filling that aesthetic need for the company, you're probably not going to get the job. And it has nothing to do with your dancing sometimes. Sometimes it does, but sometimes it doesn't. The director, do they like my feet? Do I have enough extension for them? Do they like the person that can do a whole bunch of turns? Do they like the person that has a really big jump? Whatever it is. It's so subjective as to what they want. And when I was in Miami, I used to tell the students, a lot of times you have to be like, you don't have to be better than the worst person in the corps. You have to be like 3 times better, because they know that person and they don't know you. So for them to, say, oh, you know what? So-and-so, I'm not going to offer you again, but I'm going to bring in this new person. You got to like really, if they really want you, they'll find a way to make it happen. I've seen that so many times where, oh, I don't have a job, but then they see somebody that just, blows them away. And they're like, okay, we got to get this person in here somehow,
Yeah. And that's what I actually really like about company experience summers too. Like, because I think you have, and it sounds like you're doing that, which is really nice, which is a concentrated time to work with the people who actually have the ability to hire you. Because, it's great you can bring in outside choreographers and that's wonderful. But if they can't actually hire you, I think that's something that's pretty special about what you're doing. So instead of me saying what you think is special about SMU and your dance program, why don't we close with you telling us what you think makes your SMU dance program special and unique from other universities and collegiate dance programs?
Well, I think it's the emphasis on taking the ballet modern and jazz and then adding in the Afro modern now, making really diverse movers that are versatile, that can handle any kind of choreography that comes up. I think it's the ability to double major so that they can continue to grow themselves, grow their knowledge, grow their understanding, and have the basically two pieces of paper that they can parlay into work almost in anything going forward. As we all know, now it's very rare the person that's at a place for 30, 40 years anymore. There's usually multiple careers happening in one lifetime now, right? I started in this, then I did this, then I did this, then I did that. And I think that's especially true for dancers, right? The dancing thing is not the longest thing. You know, the dancer that dances 20, 25 years is a very rare occurrence. So you come out of the program, you're able to dance, and then you also have this thing behind you, this piece of paper that says that you're educated and that you can work in a wide variety of fields. So I think that stands out with our program. I think it's the diversity. I think it's the breadth and depth of what they get when they're here. I think it's the amount of people that they come in contact with. It's the alumni associations. So I think it's a conglomeration of all of those things that makes this program unique. And also, and I would be remiss without saying, we have a pretty amazing faculty of teachers, like really good teachers. And SMU as a whole has really good teachers. So I think makes us stand out as well. We just have a really outstanding faculty, and you get a really intense work time with those professors over the 4 years that you're here. You really get to know them. They really get to know you. The professors are really able to push the dancers to grow and become what they're hoping to become as they go through.
I think that's a beautiful place to leave it. Carter, thank you so
Great.
much for joining us today.
Well, thank you. It was a really pleasure to talk to you.
If you're enjoying the Ballet Help Desk podcast, please take a moment and subscribe, rate, and drop us a review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen. And while you're at it, don't forget to swipe that auto download button so you never miss an episode. Thanks so much for your support. Until next time, the Help Desk is now closed.